Books that are turned into movies often have to leave out a lot of the information to make it a good enough length that people are going to sit down and watch it. And usually a lot of the really good bits are left out or they're changed. In the case of The Hunger Games, some of the really dark elements were left out, and today I just want to share the elements that were left out of the film but are in the books. So the first one is about the mutts. So those big dogs that we see at the end of the first movie are genetically engineered recreations of fallen tributes. So just like in the book, Katniss and Peter at the end of the film are surrounded by these mutts, these giant engineered dogs. But the movie doesn't show that the mutts are given the same eyes as the fallen tributes. One of the mutts kills Cato, which we know about, and Peter and Katniss are then forced to hide within the cornucopia while they listen to him being torn apart. The dogs in the movies are still big, as I've said, but they don't have that human trait like they do in the books. The way it's portrayed in the book does a lot to display the utter cruelty and disrespect that the Capitol shows to these children, to the people they've thrown into the arena for their entertainment. People who try to escape the Capitol are turned into Avoxes. Early in the first book, Katniss and Gale witness a girl being abducted, so a redhead girl being abducted by one of the Capitol's hovercrafts. However, the young girl actually turns up later on in the Capitol as an Avox, so someone who's had their tongue cut out, and then she's turned into a servant as further punishment for trying to escape. Although we do hear about Avoxes in the film and they do make a small appearance, it's never really explained or illustrated the true horror and the brutality behind this. The scene in the book for the fate of the red-headed girl makes it more personal, as Katniss saw the girl and then obviously saw her as an Avox. And it just illustrates how gruesome the Capitol's tactics are. So the next one is that Peter is beaten on live TV. In Mockingjay Part 1, we see Peter being interviewed by Caesar and he looks quite gaunt, he looks tired, he looks like he's going through a lot. But the movie's actually not as graphic in depicting this as the book is. In both the book and the film, Peter breaks script to try and warn District 13 that they're going to be under attack. The book differs in the fact that he is savagely beaten on camera in front of Katniss and all of Panem to witness it, whereas in the film you get the sense that it's about to happen, but you don't actually see it. Katniss is almost burnt to death. Final battle between the Capitol and District 13 is just as important in the movie as it is in the book, and Katniss is an active participant in both. However, whilst Katniss gets burnt in the movie, her wounds and her lasting damage isn't actually as severe as it is in the book. Suzanne Collin, the author, describes her flesh as sensitive, permanently scarred, and often bleeding. So it is a bit of a cruel irony that the girl on fire actually does end up on fire, literally, and becomes a burn victim. Katniss murders a stranger in the Capitol. One of the more random acts of violence in the original version of Mockingjay, Katniss and her allies are hiding out in the Capitol when they come across what they believe to be an abandoned house. A woman then surprises them, recognising Katniss, and begins to call out, but on instinct, Katniss shoots her with an arrow and kills her. Although it's understandable why the filmmakers didn't want to include this in the film, it is quite an important part of the novel. It's a turning point and it displays the way that the uprising against the Capitol has changed Katniss and how divided the people on both sides have become. The soldiers of District 13 use Nightlock to end their lives. In the movie, at the end of The Hunger Games, Katniss and Peter threaten to end their lives by eating some Nightlock berries. This obviously then forces the Capitol to spare their lives. Nightlock is then heavily implied to be the cause of death for Seneca Crane, which we see again at the end of the movie. Now we can probably be quite sure in our assumption that this was at the hands of President Snow because he did have a penchant for poison. He did have a particular liking for poison. What the movies don't tell you, or they're not as explicit about, is that the District 13 soldiers carry some pills around, and these are actually Nightlock pills. So if they were captured, they could take their own lives. Now I know that it is mentioned slightly in the film, but I'm not really sure that you'd really grasp that it is Nightlock unless you'd really read the books. Peter loses a leg in the Hunger Games. In the original Hunger Games movie, Peter's leg gets injured, but in the book, it's completely amputated. Katniss helps him by making him a tourniquet, but she doesn't actually realise how bad Peter's leg is until they're being interviewed later on by Caesar. Peter unveils a robotic leg that Capital made for him in this interview, and without this he wouldn't have actually been able to make it through the rest of the series. His robotic leg is actually mentioned numerous times in Catching Fire, where it slows him down in a way that's completely dismissed in the movies. Staying with Peter, he kills someone in the first round of the games. Peter is portrayed very much as the opposite to Katniss, and this is a theme in both the book and the films. This is why it's so significant in the first novel, where he intentionally murders someone. After the cornucopia, Peter teams up with the career tributes. At one point, Peter is actually sent back to finish off a tribute who Cato had stabbed with a spear. Katniss does watch him do it from a distance, and although he's not particularly enthusiastic about having to do it, he does still do it. Now there's a couple of ways you could argue this and you could potentially justify it. Maybe Peter was doing it because this tribute was going to die and he wanted to stop the suffering for this girl. Or you could say it was actually part of a long game, in a way where he could still protect Katniss and keep her away from the tributes. Who knows really what was going through his mind. Katniss almost dies of dehydration. In the first Hunger Games, Katniss is badass as soon as she steps into that arena. She seems cool, collected, she knows her plan, she knows what she's doing. But in the book, she has a much harder time of it to begin with. She struggles to find water for nearly 2 days and nearly dies of dehydration, whereas in the film, she finds water straight away and actually has a much easier time of it than book Katniss. Book Katniss really struggles. And it's definitely a more realistic approach to how someone probably would be in this situation. But in the book, obviously, she's our protagonist, she's our hero, she gets it done, no questions asked. So the last one is that Katniss attacks Peter after their first interview. And you're probably going, wait, we know this, we see this. And yes, we do. So this isn't a massively significant one, but there is a slight difference that happens in the book than it does in the movie. So after Peter tells Caesar that he has come here with his crush, and he's going, you know, he's devastated about it because one of them's going to have to die, or he might have to kill her, who knows. And the film shows Katniss has given him, I would say, a light push. Obviously she has him against the wall, so you know, it's not sort of like just a little push, not a shove, but it's not as extreme as what actually happens. So in the book, she actually shoves him quite hard into an urn and he ends up cutting his hand quite badly. Now, this obviously isn't a massive change to what happened, but it does show that Katniss has the frustration and the misunderstanding of how Peter's playing this game. And it does kind of feed into other actions that she takes later on, which I just found it a really interesting change. Although it's small, I thought it was a significant change that they made. But that's it, guys. I just wanted to share 10 of the things that were changed in the Hunger Games that were definitely darker in the books. Let me know what you think. Is there anything that you've maybe read and you thought actually that's a massive change to how they are in the book, character, situation, anything like that? Do let me know. Don't forget to like the video, guys. Subscribe as well so you don't miss out on anything we've got coming up. And until next time, you take care.